Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Mr. Ernest Krim III, your favorite Black History teacher, coming right back at you with another Black History fact of the day. If you're like me and you're an NBA fanatic, a basketball fanatic, a Jordan fanatic, then you're absolutely loving this ESPN Last Dance series that's been coming on every Sunday. I mean, it's taking me right back to my childhood because I grew up in Chicago in the 90s, in the midst of the 2 3-peats, the 6 championships. So every time I watch an episode, I feel like I'm going right back to my childhood. And of course, as someone who understands and knows this truth, that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. Every time they talk about his life experience, I'm learning new lessons. I'm picking up nuggets. Every time they show a highlight, I feel like I'm right back there sitting on my couch, sitting with my dad watching the game or watching the game with my friends or celebrate. But here's the thing. I'm a Jordan fan, right? You have to understand this because I'm also a history teacher, your favorite Black history teacher, as a matter of fact. We have to understand that Jordan was able to do what he did not on his own merit. He was able to do what he did because there were people before him that laid the foundation that would allow him to become a successful NBA player and, of course, the GOAT. For instance, much is said about Jackie Robinson and how he integrated baseball in the 20th century in 1946. And with all due respect, he deserves all the accolades. But as of right now, in America, the second most popular sport based on ratings and based on revenue is basketball. It's the NBA. But a lot of people don't know about the basketball players that integrated the NBA in the 1950s. We have people like Earl Lloyd, Nate Sweetwater Clifton, Chuck Cooper. Without these 3 gentlemen integrating basketball together in the 1950s, we'd have no Michael Jordan being drafted in 1984. These 3 gentlemen integrated the NBA in 1950. They each made their own unique contribution. Earl Lloyd was the first Black person to actually play the game of basketball. Nate Sweetwater Clifton was the first Black person to sign a contract to play. And Chuck Cooper would be the first one to actually get drafted in 1950. Now, the NBA in America was far from perfect in 1984 when Michael Jordan got drafted to play for the Chicago Bulls, but it was vastly different than the NBA in the America that existed when these 3 Black men were drafted to play in the league. Now, check this out. In the 1950s, you're about to see, because I got to give you the context, you're about to see the emergence of the modern-day civil rights movement a few years after that. You're about to see the emergence of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You're about to see the emergence of Malcolm X. You're about to see the emergence of people like Rosa Parks and Ella Baker. You're about to see the story that was a pivotal moment in American history, a pivotal moment in our struggle, in our fight, the Emmett Till case. You're about to see that lambasted over Jet Magazine, over newscasts all over the country. You're about to see for the first time in American history our struggle shown to people who did not have to explicitly experience it because of the mass media propagation of this time period. People were able to see what we experienced. But that did not mean that it changed overnight, because when these men were drafted, they were playing in the 1950s, when they traveled to different places in the Jim Crow South during this time, there's always this threat that they might not make it out alive. They're worried about plays. They're worried about if they're going to start. They're worried about getting their points, their buckets, playing defense, rebounding. But in the back of their mind, there's also the threat of, will I have a place to sleep tonight because this hotel might not accept me? Will I be able to go somewhere and eat because this restaurant might not accept me? And beyond just having social acceptance, there's the threat, again, y'all, of even if I go near these places with my white colleagues, my white teammates, I could get killed. Like, look, y'all, in 1940, 10 years before these men were drafted, a man named Jesse Thornton in Alabama is lynched simply because he does not refer to an officer as sir, because he does not call an officer officer. He did not disrespect him. He just called him by his name. This is the America that existed, y'all, in 1950 when these men were drafted. What can we learn from these 3 men? What can we learn from these 3 pioneers, these 3 trailblazers? What can we learn from Chuck Cooper, more specifically, the first one to be drafted and the one who would play for one of the most historic teams ever, the Boston Celtics? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This encapsulates more than anything what I learned from Chuck Cooper with this first point. The first point, y'all, there's strength in numbers. Chuck Cooper is quoted as saying that although it was difficult, of course, being one of the first black men to integrate the NBA, he didn't feel as much pressure as Jackie Robinson did when he integrated Major League Baseball 4 years prior in 1946. And that's not simply because Jackie Robinson did it first. It's because Chuck Cooper felt like he had more support. He did it with two other guys. If you're not doing something alone, you're separating that 33%, 33%, 33%, whereas Jackie Robinson is facing 100% of all the stress and all the anxiety and all the pressure that goes into being the first black person to integrate a professional sports league at that time. These guys were able to confide in each other. If there was something going on, they could call each other, they could write each other, and every so often, they play against each other on the court. They could check on each other. That makes a world of a difference as opposed to being the only person, as opposed to being the figurehead for an entire sport, an entire movement. It wasn't just about Chuck Cooper. It was also about Nate Sweetwater Clifton. It was also about Earl Lloyd, which also might be the reason why you don't know these names as much, because they were able to spread out this fame. So do you want to go fast or do you want to go far? The second thing I learned, y'all, was racism does more internal damage than external damage. Let me tell you what I mean. One time, Chuck Cooper was being interviewed by a reporter. The reporter told him, like, yo, man, you look good for 50. What's your secret? Chuck Cooper's response was, you say I look good now because racism has damaged me more internally than externally. You can't see all the wounds I deal with. What does he mean by this? The microaggressions, the overt aggressions, the N-words he was called, the regulation to doing the dirty work on the team and not having the opportunity to shine with his skill level the same way Michael Jordan did in 1984, the Jim Crow laws, the constant badgering because of his skin color, the relegation to a second-class citizen simply because of his skin color had taken a toll on him. Now, as black folks, as anybody who deals with racism, we become accustomed to it so much. We know how to deal with it. We know how to, toughen up. We know how to, quote unquote, man up or woman up or whatever and just keep pushing forward. But sometimes you got to stop and really deal with and talk about the pressures you're faced with, the racism you're faced with, the discrimination you're faced with. And again, like I always say, we have to normalize seeking mental health. We have to normalize seeking out therapy, because what he dealt with was not normal. And it's not something he should have had to face. But just because he looked nice on the exterior, just because people say black don't crack, doesn't mean you aren't cracking or breaking down internally. So metaphorically speaking, just because the car looks shiny and new, doesn't mean the engine isn't damaged. Just because the building looks beautiful on the outside and it's a shiny and bright modern edifice, doesn't mean the structure isn't crumbling internally. It is my theory that Chuck Cooper passed away at the young age of 57 from liver cancer, not just due to the stress he was exposed to by being a black person in America, or just because of the stress he was exposed to by being a pioneer for the NBA. But I theorize that he died at a younger age because he probably did not know how to properly deal with these issues the same way we know how to cope with these stresses now. And the last thing I learned from Chuck Cooper is this: dedicate more of your life to education than entertainment. Likewise, dedicate more of your life to service than superstardom. So check this out. Chuck Cooper definitely was a trailblazer. He paved the way for people like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Zion Williamson. But in his hometown, immediately after he got finished playing basketball, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania knew him more for his civic engagement, for his community activism, than they did for what he actually did on the court. Right after he retires, he goes back to school to get his master's in social work, right? Now, this is a time period where professional athletes weren't getting money from endorsement deals and there were no pensions for people who retired as well. So he gets that degree and he goes to Pennsylvania and becomes a trailblazer again. Becomes the very first black person to serve on the Parks and Recreation Board in the 1970s. Not only that, he takes it a step further and he begins to spearhead an affirmative action program for black residents with the Pittsburgh National Bank. Now let me stop for a second. Think about how historic that is. In the 1970s, he spearheads an affirmative action program right after the civil rights era concludes. So he becomes somebody who's a champion for black people to make sure that they can have equitable access to loans for the businesses. for their homes, and so on and so forth. So again, y'all, the next time you're enjoying this Last Dance series or admiring the GOAT status of Michael Jordan, or for some reason debating his status with LeBron, or looking at a Kobe highlight, for instance, make sure you pay homage to somebody like Earl Lloyd, like Chuck Cooper, like Nate Sweetwater Clifton, because without their sacrifices, without them agreeing to do the dirty work as opposed to ascending to superstardom like they could have, there'd be no opportunity for the modern day superstar to flourish in the way that they do now. So you know what I'm about to ask you. You know what I gotta say. After looking at all of this, after taking it all in, after studying it all, what action will you take to make history today?